Forget everything you think you know about air defense. Forget the S-400s, the billion-dollar radar nets, and the fortress mentality of command. Because at 3:41 a.m. on December 4th, 2025, that entire worldview was obliterated. The air at Kacha Air Base in northwestern Crimea was still vibrating. The mission was complete. Just moments ago, the Russian MiG-29 marked with the tail number Red 24 had screamed across the tarmac, finally touching down after a long, grueling sortie. Its mission had been to strike Ukrainian civilians in a residential area near Novozern, north of Kherson, a region already battered by relentless Russian air raids. It was 3:41 a.m. deep in the pre-dawn darkness. The two pilots stepped out of the cockpit, exhausted but relaxed. Below them, the massive MiG-29 airframe was still radiating intense heat. The powerful engines had not yet begun to cool down from the 3-hour flight. And perhaps those engines would never cool down again because a devastating, precise retaliation had already been set in motion. More than 37 miles away, out over the churning waters of the Black Sea, an invisible threat was racing toward the western Crimean coast. This was a flight of 4 UJ-25 Skyline drones dispatched from Ukraine. Their mission was audacious, bordering on impossible: to penetrate what Russia believed to be a safe zone, an area deep inside Crimea where Ukrainian UAVs supposedly could not reach. The 4 single-use jet UAVs, built primarily from stealthy fiberglass and carbon fiber, hugged the surface of the sea. Their altitude was razor-thin, flying just above the waterline to exploit the Earth's curvature and radar blind spots. They were heading straight for 2 critical targets: the Kacha Air Base, home of the now-grounded MiG-29, and a key cluster of low-altitude radars around Simferopol. For the initial 370 miles, the drone formation had maintained complete radio silence. They had flown an immaculate, clandestine path, weaving beneath established civilian air corridors. This was the result of months of grueling, meticulous data collection by HUR analysts. At 3:50 a.m., the 4 UJ-25s reached their critical split point. The mission demanded a perfectly coordinated, simultaneous strike on targets nearly 37 miles apart. The internal navigation algorithm instantly partitioned the formation into 2 independent lethal strike groups. Group K Alpha banked sharply southwest, locking onto the heat signature of the Kacha Air Base and the $30 million MiG-29 that had just struck Ukrainian civilians. Group Y Echo immediately turned southeast, descending toward the area near Simferopol, where the crucial Irtysh radar system sat adjacent to a joint military-civilian airfield. The Irtysh radar was designed specifically to track low-altitude targets, the very definition of the threat now bearing down upon it. Their flight paths were a masterwork of digital warfare, sharp, jagged zigzags drawn using pre-programmed terrain profiles, exploiting every ripple in the Earth curvature and utilizing every known radar blind spot. Analysts in a secure bunker near Kiev had even factored in the habitual, predictable, on-off behavior of Russian surveillance stations observed over months of continuous monitoring. A young officer performed the final check. The calculated error from the optimal pre-planned path was less than 3 feet. Everything so far was unfolding with the terrifying precision of the hundreds of simulations they had run. The drones were still 31 miles away when Russia had its fleeting, rare chance to detect the incoming threat. The coastal Podlet K1 radar finally registered something. On the night duty operator's screen, a few faint blips appeared and vanished, jittery and weak. The estimated speed was high, 340 to 370 miles per hour. The altitude was alarmingly low. Had this been a massive target, like a Su-30 or a MiG-31, the operator would have sounded the alarm immediately and contacted headquarters. But these blips were weak, highly unstable, and flickering. At this range of 31 miles, their radar signature was less than 10% of a normal fighter aircraft. The operator made a fatal decision. He typed spurious target, then, deciding it wasn't even worth reporting, deleted the note entirely. That single moment represented the last opportunity Russia had to stop the 4 UJ-25 Skylines carrying destruction toward the strategic heart of Crimea. They continued their relentless advance completely unimpeded. The Russian command structure finally grasped the gravity of the situation when the drones were just 12 miles from their targets. This tactical dilemma forced the commander to abandon standard protocols and switch immediately. They abandoned the traditional ground radar locks, which could not reliably track the small, unstable targets. Instead, they activated the specialized method, track via missile. In this lethal mode, the air defense system relies on the missile's own seeker head to acquire, lock onto, and chase the target autonomously. From two positions near Sevastopol and Simferopol, 4 elite 9M96E2 surface-to-air missiles roared to life, streaking into the night sky. These were the premium defense solution, each costing approximately $4 million US dollars. The 9M96E2 was purpose-built to destroy small, rapidly maneuvering targets. It boasted the phenomenal capability to pull 60 G, change direction almost instantly, and adjust its trajectory within fractions of a second. But Ukraine had already calculated this exact response. The instant the Russian seekers began detecting the faintest reflections off the UJ-25's carbon fiber bodies, the drones executed two separate, pre-planned evasion patterns. Toward Kacha, K1 and K2 simultaneously slammed their altitude lower, diving aggressively close to the ground. This maneuver forced the 9M96E2 missiles into extreme negative angles. In this high-density environment of dense, turbulent airflow so close to the ground, the advanced missile frequently becomes unstable. Towards Simferopol, I-1 and I-2 executed rapid, hard lateral turns, creating sharply curved flight paths. This radical, constant trajectory change threw off the missile interception algorithms within seconds. The sheer speed and agility of the drones, combined with the extreme maneuvers, overwhelmed the 60G missiles. Once the tracking angle exceeded the missile's design limits, its control fins could no longer maintain the stable airflow needed to generate corrective force. That was the moment the aerodynamics failed. It signaled the onset of aerodynamic stall. One by one, all 4 multi-million-dollar missiles lost stability. They shuddered violently, pitched over, then plummeted uselessly into the ground and exploded in the darkness. Millions of dollars in sophisticated Russian hardware had been defeated within minutes by targets costing only tens of thousands. The mid-tier air defense layer had been successfully breached. Russian command now understood they had reached the final desperate stage of defense. They immediately fell back to the terminal air defense layer where the fearsome Panzer systems were positioned. In both sectors, Kacha and Simferopol, Russia had deployed dedicated Panzer S-1 batteries, arranged in a tight box formation with strategically overlapping coverage. The design meant any UAV entering a single corner of this kill zone would face blistering crossfire from at least 2 separate gun crews. On the Kacha axis, the Western Panzer unit managed to pick up a weak signal from K1 first. The track was highly unstable due to the small radar cross-section of the UJ-25. Yet the gunner launched a 57E6 missile regardless. The system was forced to rely almost entirely on highly speculative predicted vectors to maintain the tracking solution. But just as the missile calculated its predicted intercept point, K1 and K2 simultaneously initiated a wagon wheel maneuver. This was a spiraling rotation around a fixed forward point while still rapidly advancing toward the target. The constant, violent changes in the angle of approach proved too much for the 57E6's seeker. It lost the ability to compute an intersection point, resulting in the missile overshooting K1. It detonated harmlessly off target, leaving only a brief, angry flare above the Black Sea. Realizing the inadequacy of missile guidance against these hyper-agile targets, the Panzer gunner instantly switched tactics. He couldn't possibly aim precisely at the individual UAVs. That was recognized as impossible. Instead, the gunner created a dense ballistic block of fire directly along the drone's axis of approach. K2 was struck by multiple rounds, its wing assembly instantly torn apart. It crashed violently onto a grassy patch just a few hundred feet from the Kacha runway. But K2's sacrifice created a brilliant new problem for the Russians: chaos. The shattered carbon fragments from K2 reflected radar waves as hundreds of separate, tiny points. Distinguishing the genuine advancing UAV from the massive debris was virtually impossible. K1 instantly exploited this confusion, braking sharply to the left. Meanwhile, 37 miles away at the Simferopol axis, I-1 and I-2 were replicating the success, breaking through their Panzer zone amid a similar wave of defensive chaos. Directly ahead lay their objective, the Irtysh system. This radar installation was absolutely trusted by Russia, responsible for monitoring the crucial low-altitude band around Simferopol, the area where every previous Ukrainian UAV attempt had been reliably detected and destroyed. Tonight, it was the hunter that had become the prey. The 3 remaining UJ-25s were now locked into their final attack phase. K-1 stabilized its flight at 138 feet, maintaining a speed of 382 mph, and switched irrevocably to the terminal attack mode. 3.5 seconds later, the drone slammed violently into the MiG-29's left flank, hitting precisely at hardpoint number 3. A massive, tearing blast erupted. The UJ-25's thermite core, designed for maximum destruction, burned at an astonishing 40,500 degrees Fahrenheit. This heat was so intense it melted through the airframe alloy almost instantly. The MiG-29, a cutting-edge machine worth more than $30 million US, was utterly vaporized by a cheap, expendable drone costing only a fraction of that amount. Kacha Air Base was immediately engulfed in fire, with thick, acrid smoke rising across the entire apron. The airfield commander, facing total chaos, ordered the immediate shutdown of the entire runway complex, terrified that more invisible UAVs might strike technical areas or vital fuel depots. While Kacha burned, I-1 and I-2 were entering their own terminal attack phase against the Irtysh SQ radar system, the most critical low-altitude surveillance node protecting Simferopol. At 300 meters, I-1 began its final high-angle dive, accelerating to 388 miles per hour. The camera shook slightly as the dive angle steepened. In the final decisive 0.2 seconds before impact, the entire camera frame was filled only by the Irtysh antenna, enlarged into a towering, insurmountable steel machine. The thermite warhead instantly burned through the antenna's base, destroying its delicate rotation assembly. The massive structure groaned, then collapsed inward, smashing down directly onto the control cabin below. Inside, the radar screens went instantly and irrevocably dark. The system was dead. Moments later, I-2 struck from a supplementary angle, tearing into the signal processing block positioned behind the antenna. A second massive explosion ripped through the module, utterly destroying the power systems and the critical data links. The entire technical site shuddered violently. Cabin lights flickered once, then went out completely. The power grid severed at its core. The Irtysh SQ, Russia's low-altitude eye over Crimea, was wiped out in mere seconds. In a terrifyingly short span of minutes, Russia had suffered catastrophic losses: a $30 million MiG-29 fighter and a critical Irtysh radar system. Two assets vital for low-altitude air defense were gone, leaving Crimea's crucial surveillance network partially paralyzed. Command could no longer accurately determine where the drones had gone or what might be coming next. The MiG-29 was more than just an expensive fighter. It was Kacha Air Base's sole quick-reaction aircraft, always maintained in a standby state, ready to scramble and take off in the shortest time possible. Its destruction meant Kacha instantly lost its rapid response interceptor capability, along with the entire suite of weapons and aviation equipment mounted beneath its fuselage and wings. Strategically, the loss was far deeper. Kacha instantly lost its ability to intercept medium-range UAVs approaching from Crimea's northwestern axis. Russia was immediately forced to redeploy assets and aircraft from other distant bases like Belbek or Saki. This triggered a cascade chain reaction across the entire regional alert and patrol schedules. The true replacement cost was not just the $35 million USD price tag of the airframe, but the profound strategic cost of losing immediate readiness at the exact moment Ukraine proved its deep infiltration capability. Russia estimated it would take at least several weeks just to restore Kacha's normal alert cycle. The destruction of the Irtysh SQ radar system was equally devastating. Because Irtysh was one of the most dangerous systems for tracking Ukrainian UAVs, its elimination instantly ripped open a 37 to 50 mile low-altitude gap around Simferopol. Panzer and Tor batteries operating in the region were left blind, forced to operate without reliable, localized targeting data. The entire regional air defense network was suddenly forced to rely on stations positioned farther away, which introduced unacceptable delays and less optimal viewing angles. What worried Moscow the most, far beyond the dollar value of the destroyed hardware, was the message Ukraine had delivered. This single night proved that Ukraine could systematically pierce every Russian air defense layer. It demonstrated the capability to select any high-value target deep inside Crimea and strike it with cheap, low-cost UAVs, all while Russia's multi-billion-dollar air defense network proved incapable of responding in time. What Russia had once believed was physically impossible had occurred in a single devastating night. The supposedly airtight air defense shield, the fortress of Crimea, was definitively shown to be riddled with holes. And Ukraine proved those holes could be methodically and brilliantly exploited. From that moment forward, every single Russian strategic plan that relied on using Crimea as a secure, safe zone for its air force and air defense units had to be completely and fundamentally reconsidered. Because the attacker hadn't simply knocked on the door of the fortress, it had stepped inside, walked to the throne room, and destroyed two vital assets at the heart of the base, demonstrating that no target was ever truly safe.